So, a new session before the lunch break, managing the increasing complexity of rail operations with a digital ecosystem. Rail travel is expected to grow quickly in the coming decades as governments make major investments to tackle climate change. Infrastructure managers and operators need to work together to deal with greater demand and control increasingly complex operations efficiently and sustainably. Digital innovation is vital for an era of connected mobility. How can data bridges be built between stakeholders for information to be shared and processes streamlined? In this session, infrastructure managers, operators, and digital experts will share their challenges and how fully integrated digital rail ecosystems can be created. This panel will be moderated by Benjamin Goebbelshagen, Head of Mobility and Infrastructure in Goetz Partners. Benjamin leads Goetz Partners' mobility and infrastructure practice with over 7 years of experience. He supports clients in solving complex issues in the field. Benjamin is a mobility enthusiast, strategic, B2B sales manager for complex tenders, and digital experts. I give the floor to Benjamin.
Perfect, thank you. Thanks for the nice introduction, Mr. Chavanel, and warm welcome to the audience. Happy to participate in this very interesting panel together with the experts. You see the title of the panel over here, Managing the Increasing Complexity of Rail Operations with Digital Ecosystems. When reflecting on the title, my first thought was, there are actually quite some different elements in the title where we could spend an own panel on, actually, right? Just maybe take the first word, managing. Even on managing, this word summarizes and basically simplifies multidimensional challenges operators face every day and seamlessly integrating their bits and pieces in the overall rail puzzle. And the requirements on managing are evolving and constantly and getting more complex. And this actually brings us also to the second bit of the title, the increasing complexity of rail operations. We have increasing traffic, we have more demand, we have higher security requirements, we have new technology evolving, but also legacy systems. And operators are required to manage those increasing challenges and their path dependencies. And the title also offers a potential solution for those challenges, which are digital ecosystems. I think in the last couple of days, we already heard a lot about digital ecosystems and also about the potential of digitalization for the rail industry. And I think we all agree that this potential is here. But what we often see in projects, and maybe what you've also seen, is that there are also still some challenges when trying to actually operationally integrate those potentials and not just use digital buzzwords. So I think a lot came to my mind, a lot to talk about in the next 60 minutes. And I will not do this alone, of course, but with the experts here, which I would like to welcome now on the stage. And the first one, the ones you have been listening to the panel just before, maybe you already know him. It's Roel Zudema. Welcome on stage. Roel is the global leader for rail and ground transport at Atos. He has been working in the industry for over 2 decades, I think. And he is and was and still will be supporting clients and actually building those digital ecosystems and making them operationally work, which we will just discuss. So thanks and welcome, Roel. Next to Roel, I would also like to introduce Rolf Herdi. Rolf Herdi is Chief Technology and Innovation Officer at Deutsche Bahn. I think he has also been working over decades in the industry, and in his current role, he's actually shaping such collaborations and ecosystems at Deutsche Bahn. And the last but not least I want to introduce is Heigo Sarre. Heigo Sarre is working at the Rail Baltica project currently. He is also in the industry for over a decade and is now trying and actually preparing the Rail Baltica project for operational readiness. So thanks to all of you and welcome on stage. We will kick off the discussion and I will now hand over to Roel to give an introduction to the topic.
Many thanks, Benjamin, for the introduction. Very welcome to everybody here in the room. Yes, I would like to discuss with my colleague panelist and the moderator about managing the increasing complexity of rail operations. As Atos, we think that digital platforms can contribute to make the ecosystem of partners for the daily train operations more effective in managing the growth and all the other important ambitions we have heard over the last 1.5 days here in this room and the other room. By all kinds of speakers, which give a very holistic overview of the ambition of the railways and the European railways in particular, and very happy to share with you our thoughts about how we can manage that complexity and achieving the ambition as stated. So yeah, having an ambition is of course very important, but I think in the realization of that ambition, I think there are enablers, things which really helps the railway industry to achieve that ambition, but there are also things we need to overcome because they are happening to us. I think one of the most important enablers to care for the growth is, of course, the ETCS or ERTMS implementation. I think my neighbors are very busy with that. I think the Deutsche Bahn already make good progress with it. In the Netherlands, we are starting with it, and many other European countries, including the Baltics, will follow, of course. So that's a huge an enabler of huge importance. Also, automatic train operations will help. But there are also things we should think about to deliver solutions for. One of them, of course, is the fact that there is an outflow of people who know all about it, very experienced people, because they are going to retirement. And at the same time, we see a huge shortage on the labor market. And that means that we have to take action there, because with less people, and also with, let's say, not too large investments in new rail infrastructure, we have to take care of that growth. That also is true that the availability of assets then becomes more and more important. You don't have the time, you don't have the slack for, let's say, disturbances or incidents. So you have to make it very reliable, the availability of assets. What we also see, and where we have talked about over the last 1.5 days, is the changing customer demand. Customers want to have more services. We just discussed in the previous session, but also they are caring for a door-to-door solution, right? Where they are willing to combine more than one modality to come from A to B. So to say, and they would like to make it more specific. I will come back to that later. So, yes, we have a strong ambition, and we are all very much motivated to make that ambition happening. But at the same time, we have some enablers, but also some challenges to come. And yeah, we as Atos, we believe that let's say the new trend of digital platforms can help to bring the different actors in the daily train operations in a more effective way together to make that ambition and the promise to the society and the promise to the passengers and the rail freight operators happening. And I think there are four, let's say, four domains where we can apply digital platforms. First of all, that's at mobility as a service to help customers to come from A to B. As we speak, we have just started a project for the region of Brussels to implement mobility as a service. And I'm not sure if you visited Brussels lately, but if you walk through the city center of Brussels, you see a lot of steps, like you see here in Berlin as well. And what you can do is you can order your train ticket to go to Brussels. Then you can order the tram. You can order a step, etc. And that's the first step of the mobility as a service platform. What we see happening in Brussels, but also in other cities. So first, connect the mobility providers. Being step providers, e-bike providers, scooters, Uber, the urban transport, the railway, and then the second step is to automatically plan the route from A to B, where you can make the choice whether you will have the lowest price or the lowest emission or the fastest time, those kind of things. And as the platform is going to learn you and have historical data about your, let's say, travel behavior, the first step will be that those mobility as a service platforms are going to advise you what to do. You're Rolf Hardy. Nice to be back in Brussels. I think this is the way of traveling you suits the most. And those kind of things are in the future, but of course they are we are ready to grab them, so to say. We also see that the digital platforms for asset management, for data-driven asset management, is coming in a stage of industrializing. If you have gone to other events like this one over the last 2 or 3 years, I think there were a lot of presentations about experiments of data-driven asset management. What can you do with a drone? What can you do with sensor X? What can you do with sensor Y? What can you do with cameras on trains? And I see happening that infrastructure managers and train operators are now industrializing those experiments and implement them in the processes and get their people ready to do indeed a visual inspection of tracks via their laptop or their desktop and rely on it and take decisions on data. Where they were a little bit hesitating to do so a couple of years ago. That's what I see happening. And of course, that is very important when you have an ecosystem of constructors who are responsible for certain areas in the country to do the maintenance and repair, or you have a third party taking care of your rolling stock, so as you have them in Europe, like Euromaint or ÖBB Technik or Talgo. Sharing data becomes more and more important to make the high availability of your assets happening. The same you see as a very important initiative in Europe about rail freight forward. So rail freight forward is let's say a collaboration between rail freight undertakers, the large, including my neighbor, the large rail freight transporters like Deutsche Bahn and several others, SNCF, not to forget. etc., to see how can we digitize the whole supply chain so that we can, let's say, do our activities more efficient, so that we get a better lead time, that we get a more reliable lead time, that we can deliver services against a lower cost and make the rail freight transport more competitive towards road and barge transport. And if we would like to deliver the Green Deal, 30% of freight movements will be taken place by rail, we definitely have to continue that initiative of rail freight forward. Last but not least, due to the fact that with less people you have to manage more complex rail traffic, more complex because it's more, and due to ETCS, the trains are, the distances between trains becomes shorter. You need to adjust faster and more accurate and more effective than you ever had done before. And that means that automation and intelligence in rail traffic management will be needed to make that grow and safe transport possible. So that's my view on why digital platforms are needed to support the ecosystem of infrastructure managers, train operators, rail freight undertakers, constructing parties more effective, so that we are all future-proof and make 30% growth of rail traffic possible. So the statement for the discussion will be exactly that. What about digital platforms in ecosystems for railways? What do we think about that? Now, as I said, as Atos, we believe it is a important thing for the future.
Thanks, Will, for the introduction. Yes, and I think if you click one more slide, advanced. Exactly as you said, right? Your thesis, the rail ecosystem cannot fulfill the challenges you just described without digital platforms. And I totally agree, actually, to this topic. And maybe to introduce Rolf to the round. At Deutsche Bahn, I think you are also already working on building such digital ecosystems in cross-industry collaborations. And maybe if I could ask you to elaborate a little bit how at Deutsche Bahn you are approaching this topic.
Well, thank you. Well, yes, it's true. I mean, well, you raised all the important points, which sort of are the challenges we are facing, and actually, I could say, yeah, that's it. Let's do that, and that will be the end of the discussion. But of course, it's not as simple as that. The challenge is in the execution, and we are working very hard to achieve that, and I would like to raise 2 points of that. Let me start with on the higher technology end, where you say traffic control must be supported by automation and intelligence. This is exactly what we do find. We want to double our capacity on existing tracks by 2030. At this point, if I would sit here, honestly, I would say that's not possible. And we're struggling today. Nevertheless, I'm convinced we're going to achieve that. And how are we going to achieve that is, of course, ETCS. Although ETCS on its own will not bring it, it has to be moving block, and it has to be shorter blocks, which we don't do yet to that extent. But we are working on a quite substantial program to use artificial intelligence in order to manage the traffic. Managing the traffic on the tracks is quite a challenge, but it can be done with automation. What is really killing us is all the events which are disturbing traffic. Yeah? I give you, we have roughly, we have over 1,000 what we call emergency situations, which is a nice word for suicides. And per year, that is making a huge interruption. Then you have other disturbances. To handle that and all its complexity, it's not possible anymore with strict automation and human brains. And therefore, we see a big challenge to do that, and we're starting programs to develop artificial intelligence. You can't do it automatically. You always need to have a person in between who sort of makes okay, I think that works. Otherwise, you would end up with like with your nav system on your car, where you're ending up with somewhere middle in the forest on a footpath, and we can't allow that. So automation, artificial intelligence is very important, but and I always stress that all this digitalization and asset tracking, and so it's very important. It's totally useless if your equipment doesn't work. And we there have a big challenge. We have on the comfort side, air conditioning units break down, doors don't operate, pantographs, and so on and so on. We have in Deutsche Bahn last year, we had over 90,000 technical incidents which disrupted traffic, creating more than 1.1 million minutes of delay. And we probably have even counted for all of that. And this is what we need to tackle together as an industry, and really sift out those constant, repeated technical problems, which is annoying passengers really, really bad, and which is preventing us to achieve all that.
Thanks, Rolf. And I think you touched there some very important topics, especially concerning implementation of those steps, right? Because in the end, all the technology you are developing is useless if the right people are using it, actually, right? So it's also a transformational challenge we are facing here, which also needs cross-industry collaboration, I guess.
Yes.
So totally agree. And maybe let's touch back on those points a little bit later. Maybe first to Heiko, introducing you to the round. And quite differently than Rolf at Deutsche Bahn, you are now at Rail Baltica and having a kind of greenfield environment, at least, right? Where you're in the process of starting such a development. Do you want to outline a little bit how you are currently undergoing the collaboration?
Yeah, thanks for having me here. Exactly, as we are at the beginning of our journey with our railway ecosystem, then just for the background that currently there is the main activity on the design, and some of the places are the ongoing also the construction. But still, what is the main challenge is that we are now transforming or try to handle the transformation to becoming the service provider as well. So not just the project organization as well, but also becoming the real infrastructure manager and providing the real service for the market. So I would say this complexity issue and the data topic that is several times raised in these panels today and yesterday is very, very adequate right now, because the data is already there. The data is every day is becoming more and more and more. So every time when the designer providing the design solutions or the BIM models, then there is the new information. So what to do with the information, and this is the one of the topics how do we start with this data management, or start thinking about the asset management that we're already building the baseline. And I think this is one of the crucial areas also for the existing system, that if everything changes in this ecosystem, or is it some new application or new demand or new technology, then you need to think how does it reflect your organization, because it's not just that it's new application, it affects your, maybe it affects your strategic point of view, it affects your functions, it affects your people, your software or hardware. So this is, I think, one of the baseline when talking about the complexity, just to simplify your organization, simplify your boundaries where you act, to understand how does it this digital ecosystem really affects you. And I believe this is one of the key points.
Yes, thank you, Heiko. Actually, a very nice description of the transformational challenge you just made, right? All the players in the industry are probably going to face in the next years. And maybe following up on the baselining point you made on the data availability, data integrity. I think this is also something you mentioned which we're discussing in the last couple of days here quite often. I mean, there is already existing quite a lot of data in the industry from all the legacy systems. All players are starting to use this data now, and now really get the feeling, okay, what do we need, where do we stand with the data, and what do we don't have right now? And maybe, Raul, following up to you, also your vision of the digital ecosystem. I guess data is the key baseline. Where do you see the industry standing there, and how to maybe get even to the next level for the ecosystem?
Yeah, and I totally agree with all the speakers that data that's the most important enabler to bring such an ecosystem a step further. And I see two things happening. First of all, the sharing data. Especially in the asset management, you see that some of the train OEMs or the maintenance parties for the trains, they hide their data under the kimono. Nobody's getting it. And that, of course, is a pain in the ass for the operators. You see the same on the infrastructure management side with the construction and building companies. So they are asking for open up your kimono because we would like to see the data. And those parties are hesitating because they are thinking that opening up the data will, let's say, have disadvantages for their competitive situation, or they are to blame them. And of course that should be avoided. Otherwise, there is no openness. If openness means that you are going to blame, that doesn't work. So that's a cultural change between parties in an ecosystem, that they share their data not to blame each other, but to help each other. And that's an important thing which should be achieved. And let's be honest, most of the, let's say, customers didn't ask for the data when they signed the contracts. And because it was not necessary at that time. But now I see, let's say, rail organizations taking care of the delivery of data in the contracts, in the service level agreements. So that's one thing. The other thing is, of course, and that's especially when you see the infrastructure manager working with the train operators, sometimes they have other meanings by the same kinds of data. And that's something I recognize. When my daughter was living in London, I went to Schiphol to pick her up, and then I saw arrival time. Is that? Then okay, here she comes. But it takes 30 minutes before she's really there, because arrival time can be putting your wheels on the ground, or putting your wheels on the blocks at the gate, and then and that's exactly what happens in the railway industry as well. That certain parties have different definitions for the same thing. So making that standardized and harmonized is one important enabler, I think, to collaborate by means of data sharing. The other important thing is that you have very clearly defined data owners. The one is responsible for the customer data, the other one is responsible for the asset data, and the third one is responsible for this and this. So that you know exactly there's only one person, only one source who is responsible for it, and then is also accountable for the quality of the data. So that's the second. The third one is that you have clear processes for the management of your data. And I have to say that there is very mature tooling on the market which can help you to manage the data, to keep the integrity and the quality in good shape, so to say. And those are important things which are mandatory to start working by means of data platforms where different actors can take their decisions to bring the real operation a step forward. So.
Thanks, Raul. Ralph, maybe following up on this, Raul just described, I think, very good the current restrictions we have within sharing data, but also in the definition of data. And he also mentioned that standardization could be one very important lever to overcome those challenges. Do you agree with that? And maybe also, as I already guessed the answer, how are you currently also working on this for Deutsche Bahn?
Yes, I principally fully agree, and access to data is one of the key enablers to achieve all those things. And it's a tricky one. It's like you said, Rael, all the contracts we have done 10 years ago, even nobody thought about data, and I'm sort of seeing those contracts again and again, and really from today's point of view, how the hell could we sign those contracts? And it is absolutely crucial for the industry to develop an understanding, a common understanding how to deal with data. And what we find now is we having this approach where we approach partners, OEMs, and say, oh, come on, let's do something together, because we say data is one of the few things, if you share, it does double in size. Yeah, and this is what we're trying to do, and the challenge is to create a environment where it's safe to share data. That sounds easy, but it's actually not easy, because we find ourselves in a very complex situation. There are different reasons why somebody doesn't want to share data. One is there is a fear that with this data some damage can happen to whatever is the security, or even to the company providing the data. Secondly, it is that with this data you can get some conclusions on the design and copy the design. This is quite dominant. We find actually, first we thought, okay, we clear with the OEM for the data, and if that's okay, then we're okay. But what we find, we actually have different levels of companies involved, and also different levels of data. So the OEM has a certain set of data, but the sub-supplier has a total different set of data. And what we actually find quite ironically is the sub-supplier, is it a brakes manufacturer or air conditioning manufacturer, would be quite happy to share data with us, but not with the OEM. And because of reasons, they are afraid that the OEM is using that to a commercial disadvantage to them. And we're trying at the moment to build a safe haven for data, where we can ensure that that's first of all data goes in. And maybe one point I don't fully agree with your approach, although I recognize it's a valid approach, is what we find is if you want to install a strict regime, every data needs a clear owner and a clear process, you will never ever get there. It's impossible. It's a mission impossible because it's far too slow. What we find is that find a container where you can drop in all data and then ensure that people with different interests can have different access to that data, because an operator has a different view and requirement on the data as a maintainer, for instance, and that goes down to cleaning up the data for data consistency and so on. So we go away from that. So we create a safe container where we can ensure the sub-supplier that data is safe, not accessible by the OEM, but we have access what we agree and so on. And it has a technical challenge and a legal challenge, and that's how we approach it.
Yeah, I think I'm very pleased to hear your vision on that. I think with your safe container for data, I think you reach the same as other organizations like we did for SNCF and Air France KLM to strictly regulate it by data owners. That was at the end of the day for the same purpose. So there are more ways which go to Rome, as we say in the Netherlands, to reach the same goal. So I think, yes, to have safe containers is a good measure to let's say open up the data and disappear the fear. But I think an alternative for that is to organize it by means of data owners and processes. But I think, it depends per situation what works the best, I think. And I really appreciate your solution on that. Do you agree?
Yeah, I fully agree. I think that there is no right or wrong way for this. It really depends on the situation, and this is so diversified from operator to user that there is not a common approach. What is important is the dialogue, and we definitely at Deutsche Bahn, we have recognized that we have to build a layer on trust with the people we want to share the data, or we want to have shared data, and it starts with us. There will be plenty of examples where we in the past have not really behaved in a way that to build trust with the supplier. Yeah, but the first thing you do is you have some set of data, you can prove, oh, your door's not working, and then you send your legal teams and say, hey, your door's not working. That's not, I didn't say we have done that, but it's just as an example. So we really need to sort of work on all of us, and then really make sure what are we going to do with this data, and I think it's a long process.
Yeah, exactly true, and that is the whole evolution from, so let's say, customer supplier to an ecosystem, where you have a totally other balance in trust and control than in a supplier, a customer supplier, and that exactly is true for sharing data. You need a totally different control and trust model than in the old situation.
Yeah, we have not yet reached this TikTok or Facebook level where everybody's happy just to share almost everything on your life. We're quite far away from that.
Okay, thanks. Maybe Heiko, one question to you, also regarding the data baselining. I mean, you just mentioned you're at the beginning now in the design phase, but already data is crucial for you at this point. How are you approaching the data baselining topic, as now you kind of have the chance to really build something from the scratch?
Yeah, indeed. Actually, the approach is that as the Rail Baltica is one project, covering all 3 countries, then we're standardizing the way or what we collect, or how we, for example, for the BIM models, how do you understand the model itself, what do you require from the designer, so what is the baseline for that, and we are collecting all the asset register basically and updating that accordingly. So this is gonna be the baseline for the O&M and for the construction period. So where this model should be updated and the information would be more adequate. But just one addition or remark for the data management. I really like this comparison that the railway sector is one of the oldest startups, and I tried to think about how it's related to the data collection. Then if you think about as a startup, then one of the focuses is your value proposition. So what is your existence, or why do you do that? What is exactly the point of the startup? So also collecting the data, I think that the point is that how exactly this data will benefit the value what you propose for the as an IM. I believe this is might be different. So if you are providing some social service, does it affect somehow this social service, or why do you collect the data? Because I really like the idea in the morning session. I believe that in the railway sector that we have lots of data, but it's just data. We need information, and I really like this idea that the open source logic to the info managers to sharing some of the data for the rest of the stakeholders. It means that why shouldn't we? Or I put that way because it's the public network, it's the public service. Should we have the common baseline what we want to share with the rest of the stakeholders? So this would be, I think, one of the points that if you're collecting the data, it should be right one. Try to think about how does it affect your the main strategic value, and if you are making some models, then test it definitely, not going on live without testing, and then implement and try to reach to these changes in the ecosystem as before said already. So it's a ongoing work.
Yes, I can imagine. Thank you. Maybe to summarize, until so far, I think what was a common understanding in this round, and that it's really important to what you just mentioned, Heiko, to actually define what you need the data for and what kind of data you need for that. So the problem and value statement is actually important, and not just collect everything you want and maybe you don't ever use it. And to do this also then operationally, to find the solutions to overcome the hurdles currently in the industry and data sharing, get the right incentives for everyone to use it, and also then the technological solution to create the APIs and the interfaces. And maybe before we come to the rather operational topic of this panel, looking in the audience, are there any questions so far for the panelists? Don't see any hands in the air. Then maybe I will just continue. At the beginning, we also talked about that it's not just about technology, but also about transformation, implementing then the technologies you are developing and actually making operational changes. And maybe, Raoul, to start with you, what do you need? What do you think is necessary and required to actually, when you maybe have the digital ecosystem, to also make it operationally work for the people?
Yeah, that's a very good question indeed. I think from the technical side, I think we are pretty well done, because we have good vendors, we have mature tooling, mature platforms, either from Azure or from Amazon or from Google. It's great stuff. You can easily scale it, things like that. The technology is fine, right? The other thing is the data we discussed about, and I think we shared some good best practices how to overcome the challenges in data sharing and the quality of data. But the other, and then I think as far as we as Atos are concerned, there are two others left. That's the processes and the people. The processes, of course, how can we and that has to do with the, let's say, bringing an experiment into, let's say, in an industrialized environment where you definitely are going to use data-driven insights into your daily processes. So you have to integrate that, and sometimes you will change, let's say, human process steps into automated process steps driven by data insights and data models. And most important is the people. I have done a project for the urban transport in Amsterdam, where people are inspecting the tracks by means of the bicycle, because in Amsterdam we do everything by bike. And how do we convince that person that sitting behind his desktop is as much efficient as going with a lot of sunshine at 22 degrees on your bike? And at the end of the day, we succeed to do that, and we succeed to do that because we involve that person from the very beginning, right? And he became more and more enthusiastic, and at the end of the day, he was convincing his colleagues, hey, guys, we can do it another way. So we have a problem if it is nice weather, but in the Netherlands, it's mostly bad weather, so we can better stay from our laptop and see the same things. And I think that's important, to involve the people from the very beginning in the experiments, and then you have the ambassadors for the industrialization phase and the scale-up phase, and then you make really steps forward, because they have to. We need to understand that they are the people we have to make successful by means of help them to take better decisions so that they are more successful in the daily job. I think that's the whole thing.
Thanks, Rolf. Rolf, Raoul just described the interdisciplinary challenge we have, right? And we have to take stakeholders from the various disciplines to make those projects work operationally. How do you staff your projects at Deutsche Bahn? A combination of heavy metal and Daft Punk, or?
Switch that on. Yeah, I think it's a good point. What we did find that you have to have this cross the organization, cross the functionality teams to build together, and we're trying that, and that actually involves people from the workshop, but also from procurement, from IT, and so on, to ensure what the role just described, which can only support. We have to bring in the people from the beginning. You also but have to see your limits. Not everything can be replaced with technology today. I don't say that in the future. I just remember going some situation where we had this young shots who totally into virtual reality and just convinced that with virtual reality this is the cure to all evil we have in the world, and they go into this workshop guy and say, well, put your goggles on and then you see your equipment and you can draw drawings, but the person on the shop floor knew his equipment. There was nothing to learn except he had these huge goggles which he had to change the battery every 2 hours, and it just didn't give any added value to that person. So I think it's also important to understand where the technology is applied. We had a similar incident. Actually, myself, I went into the trap. It was quite a while ago with condition-based monitoring. The obvious thing is doors. Doors you can monitor very well. Yeah, the opening time, the current it takes, and you put some diagnostics on it, and then you can predict the failure. I mean, this is great. And I went to the shop floor and let's do this. This is great. Now you can predict the failure of your door and everything will be fine. And just to be told, well, look, that's very nice, but I don't care. Because of a broken door, the train will remain in service. I cannot change my schedule in maintenance because of one faulty door. So there is no point to me to predict that failure. And I think these are just the things we need to learn. I don't say it shouldn't be an excuse, but we have to factor that in. And it's, like you said, it's the processes, it's the integration, and it's the people. And just then, as my final statement on that, what I also find, it has become better now, but there was sort of the time where, we just have to educate the people that digitalization is the thing to go, and let's put them all through these boot camps, and they come out with different minds, and that's not the right approach. People not stupid. Mm-hmm. The technology has to be fit for the purpose. That's important.
I think you raise a very important point, and I think 3 or 4 months ago, I talked to the fleet manager of the Dutch Railways, and I asked him, now you can have all the condition of the trains visible. What's your feeling? He said it's a nightmare. It's a nightmare because we can exactly predict when the train will come into failure, but we are not able to repair it on time. And that's exactly what you are saying, Rolf. It's not only to say, hey guys, in 3 days' time that train is not operational, but you also have to advise or even prepare a work order how to repair it and when to repair it, because you need the 4 M's, but also the train pads to bring the train to the depot, and that makes it very complicated. And indeed, bringing insights is the first step, but then you have to make it actionable so that you can solve the problem and not only, show the problem. That's exactly what you're saying now.
Heiko, maybe also asking you this question, as you also raised the transformational challenge in the beginning on operational level, but also maybe more on a strategic level to only even highlight the importance and also the urgency, but also the challenges for the top management when starting this journey. What is your point on this?
I believe this. It's totally. First of all, I agree with the rest of the panelists that the question is the broader, not just the technical or the data question. The question is, do you have the leadership for that change? Do you have this continuous activity? Do you really want to change? Do you really want to implement this new discipline in the organization? And I believe this is one of the main aspects what I see in our project as well. We need strong leadership if we want to become the high-level infra manager and providing all the necessary services. And I think this is quite simple because change management is quite simple. There's plenty of theoretical models you can find, but reality is something else. So you need to be on track all the time.
Thank you. As we are reaching the final minutes actually of our panel already, having a look in the audience again, are there any more? Well, are there any questions? Not anymore. Otherwise, of course, afterwards we can all talk bilaterally. Okay. So maybe to some closing remarks, I think we kind of discussed and outlined the vision and the great potential of such digital ecosystems, right? Which they could have for the overall industry. I think we also touched on that there are still quite some challenges we may have to overcome. But I think what's very positive, what you also mentioned, Roel, that even sitting here 3 years ago and now, there's huge progress. Yeah. Across the industry, right? So the journey is really under the way, and it's pacing up, which is actually, I think, a very good message. So thanks to all of you very much for the discussion. Thanks to the audience. And yeah, happy to follow up bilaterally afterwards.